Welcome to Week Ahead. My name is Ibrahim Sani.
And I'm Hafiz Mazuki.
So this is a new show. Every week we're going to be bringing you some updates that you need to be aware of for the week that is coming ahead.
This is practically the first episode of this new show. And
Yeah.
of course, we'll not be looking just at the week ahead, but also the year ahead.
Right. So what's up for the year ahead? Let's focus on the first agenda right now. In Malaysia, the education industry is of course facing a tough challenge for this year. Last year in 2020, we've seen how the education sector was impacted significantly. Even my own 3 kids have now turned my dining room into a classroom. So the question is, what will happen for 2021? Some parts of Malaysia, we've seen that the schools have opened, but in many parts, including that of highly populated areas like Selangor, like Penang and Johor, are still facing some form of curfew or MCO. So the question now is, what will the year ahead, on top of the week ahead, will look like for the education sector?
And it's very important, Ibrahim, because we're looking at this whole education system. And if we revisit 2020 as what it was, there's a lot of interruptions to how the teaching and learning process for all these students.
Yeah.
Is it going to be something of the same for 2021? We don't know.
Yeah.
And usually when we talk about the week ahead, we look at usually the first week of January is basically when parents are busy. You being a parent yourself.
Yeah.
For school-going children, I'm a parent as well, but my kids haven't gone to school. But for parents who have school-going children, this would be the critical week. You know, getting your children ready to go to school, etc., opening for the school year. But now it's already shifted 3 weeks ahead.
The question now is, it's never about the not allowing kids to go to school. It's about containing that kind of spread, and we've seen how the vector can actually be overwhelming if people are cramped in a particular place for a long time, confined, closed spaces for, let's say 8 hours. Is just breeding for infections. So the question now is whether or not we have to really think long term into whether we can allow children to study from home, because let's face it, 90% of the Malaysian students might not be able to study from the comforts of their own home. Either they don't have connectivity, they don't have devices, they don't have, they don't have the support that they need in terms of if they're young children, they need a parental support to help them with navigating their books and all that. But at the same time, we want to stop the infections from growing. Are we in a tough position? What do you think?
Yes, and if we talk about just learning from home, and it's not just learning the lessons from home, we're also talking about social interactions between the children, and which is basically non-existent now. So if we look at other countries, in fact, educationist Cheryl Fernando have said before on Consider This that they're talking about a model where it's a bubble, or what's termed as a pod, where groups of students, usually if during our time, a class consists of maybe 20 to 30 children, but a bubble or a pod only consists of 15 or less children with one teacher. So the idea, if any one of the student or the teacher is COVID positive, only the bubble isolate. Yeah. The rest of the school can go on. So assuming that each school have more than 30 bubbles of sort, and that is how we can keep the education flowing throughout the year.
One thing interesting is that a few weeks ago I interviewed Samuel Isaiah. You might know him from the fact that he was shortlisted as the 10 best teachers in the world.
Yes.
Samuel was talking about a highly decentralized method of education system where each and every single district or school area must empower their own teachers on how to conduct their classes, because he says that there's no better person on the ground other than the teacher themselves that can actually navigate this challenge by themselves. By now we've had 1 full year of how to manage COVID risks.
Yes.
And because of that, teachers, just like any Malaysian right now, are fully familiar with the way they need to curb the risk of infection. And because of that, they know the circumstances that they're in. They can roll out the situation better in a way where they can provide the best form of education to the school children. So that's another way of looking at it. Not just a centralized way of you mentioning it, making it bubbles or stuff like that, where Cheryl Fernando was talking about and Consider This, but also Samuel Isaiah's method of doing it decentralized. Think about it this way. He was teaching in a rural place in Pahang, and he could have face-to-face interactions. Why? Because the area was located as a green zone, but at the same time he could also help students that are not in the area and can help them navigate in a way where they can have the most optimal teaching if the teachers allow them to do so. So I think decentralized training or decentralized teaching has to be a thinking process as well. Yeah.
Yeah, I think the one size fits all approach will not work in this pandemic era education. Especially what you said, what Samuel suggested is basically a lot on the other teachers' mind and also some parents' mind, because I think we cannot use the same system for urban, rural, semi-urban, etc., etc. Each district should have its own tailored approach based on whether it's a green zone, orange zone, red zone, so that, you know, not everyone is affected by what's going on in the Klang Valley or Johor Bahru or Penang, etc., etc.
Fantastic. Okay, we're going for a short break. Let us know what you think, how the education sector can move forward in terms of teaching children for 2021. Just use the hashtag AWANI News and of course tag Hafiz and myself. And perhaps for the next upcoming episode, we can go through some of the comments that you leave on Twitter. For now, we'll go for a short break. We'll be right back. Welcome back. You are watching The Week Ahead with me, Ibrahim Sani.
And Hafiz Mazuki.
So 2021 is going to be a tough year for everyone, but more so for politicians. The people have been debating whether or not to have elections for the entire year of 2020. 2021, it's going to be a really tough year for us to avoid an election, considering that there might be state elections brewing in Sarawak, and perhaps an even greater election than that, which is the general election that might take place in a situation where COVID is still overwhelming the country. Hafiz, do you think that this will be an election year?
I mean, looking at the signs, I shall say, Sarawak is supposed to call for elections before the middle of this year. So that may force a situation where if you're already having one state election, might as well you do everything one shot, so that to reduce the risk of it growing. But of course, it banks on, again, whether the vaccines disseminated properly to what kind of percentage of population. So as of now, yes, the Perikatan National Government is working. They just passed the budget. Everything is going fine. But I'm sure the talk will intensify as we move forward January, February, March, and whenever Sarawak indicates they're going to hold the state election.
Now the thing is, when it comes to elections, in Malaysia it's always about coalition building pre-election.
Yes.
One MP, Nik Nazmi, has talked about it at length about how coalitions are built in other countries, particularly in Europe, European countries, where coalitions are formed after an election.
Yes.
That's always an interesting topic to be made. But still, pre-election coalition building or post-election coalition forming still depends on what political parties there are registered right now. Muafakat has not yet been registered.
Yes.
Muda is still demanding to be registered as soon as possible.
Pejuang is not. Is still undergoing.
Yep. So we're down to the familiar faces of PKR, DAP, BN, PAS, and the new entrants.
The usual suspects.
Yeah, but the new entrants are not there yet. So how do you think this will pan out?
I think, I mean, recently on AWANI, we've had a dialogue pembangkang where all the opposition, most of the opposition parties sit together and talk about a grand coalition. And when they talk about grand coalition, of course, it's something that is unfamiliar to us Malaysians, because we're very familiar with the whole BN, PN, and Pakatan Harapan. We don't talk about parties reformulating coalition or realigning formation after winning the election. But you have to remember, back in 2008, there was no Pakatan Rakyat. Basically, Pakatan Rakyat was formed right after the result, and that's how Penang government was built. That's how Kedah government was built. That's how Selangor government was built back then in 2008. And we're looking into a similar situation if it were to happen, because as you can see, Perikatan Nasional is a formalized coalition, but it does not consist of UMNO. So and we all know UMNO is very important when you talk about Malaysian politics. How many seats they won, they win, how are they going to position themselves is going to be pivotal to who actually takes over Putrajaya.
I have done this Venn diagram. Let's just pull this Venn diagram up on the screen. This basically plots all the coalition that we have as of now. Things may change very quick in the weeks to come. But as you can see, it's very convoluted. It took time with me and my graphics team to actually craft this particular Venn diagram up. But nobody is contesting the legitimacy of this Venn diagram thus far, unless somebody can say, okay, this is wrong, this is the way
as of January 2021, this still stands.
Right. That's not how a political party coalition should look like, as far as I'm concerned.
But as far I mean, if we look at politics in other countries, Ibrahim,
It's not going to be as convoluted as this, brother.
yes, but new relationship, new coalition is always built. You can see it in the UK, you can see it in New Zealand. Maybe this election we work together. Next election, if I win more seats, off you go.
Yeah.
And I think this is part of a maturing democracy in Malaysia. You know,
Yeah.
more people are understanding, more people are politically aware, so more people are more in tune with national issues, and it's very clear which side they're on.
Yeah.
So I think what's important here is, of course, again, to keep an open mind and look at things from the point of view as how do we ensure stability, because whatever government that comes after this, it has to be a strong government,
All right.
because we are dealing with a very tough pandemic.
So that's exactly what I'm talking about. The country has been absolved or obsessed with personality politics for the
Yes.
longest of time.
Yes.
We've had an MP here who shaved his head off, and that is just an emblematic of what the country is going through right now. It's still personality driven.
Yes.
It's not about messages that is driven. It's not about policies that is being fronted. MP of Simpang Renggam, the former Education Minister Mazli,
Dr. Mazli
was talking about how he was showing a poster or a study that shows MPs debating on policy matters in the parliament versus MPs just talking in the parliament. I don't know whether you've seen that.
I've seen that. And it's pretty much accurate. I've covered parliament for like
It's the longest of
a
time.
good 3-4 years.
That's the point, right? I mean, there's no point talking in the parliament if you're not talking about policy. I mean, it's not. You want to talk about stuff, you come to this show and you can talk at
Yes,
length, right?
yes.
But in the parliament, you need to talk about policies. But what policies can you talk about if your own political party has not championed a particular policy thus far? I think in order for us to have a faster maturing politics, you need to start talking about policies, and you need to start talking about the messages that needs to be done. My opinion, at least at this point in time, very few political parties are consistent on their messaging. Very few. And you might not like the messaging that they give out. For me, PAS has been consistent on their messaging. And
They've never strayed away.
They've never strayed away. And when you think of PAS, you only think of their message. That's one idea that I'm trying to push forward here.
And they're very consistent no matter who comes and goes.
And whatever coalition that they are building the partnership with.
Exactly.
I can't say the same for the rest of the political parties out there. So I think 2021, we should start looking beyond the policies and politics, beyond the personalities, and move into messages and into politics. I think that's how we can move ahead when we want a stability government.
I totally agree with you, Ibrahim. But I want to also add another point. It's a chicken and egg dilemma. You know, you want politicians to talk more about policies, but they were voted in by their constituents.
Yeah.
And I would say generally most constituents would not want to follow what is RCEP, what's the new policies that you are debating this round. So I think it's more of it's a progression. We as a society have to progress together towards more meaningful policies, and the political parties have to start fielding politicians that fit those messages.
Fantastic. Which brings us nicely into that third idea of what kind of elections that are already happening or that will happen this week. That's coming up after this break when we talk about the Georgia Senate election in the US. We'll be right back after these messages. Welcome back. This is Week Ahead. We shall talk about items that will be happening in the week ahead. And of course, in this coming week in the US, we have a major election coming up. This is, of course, the Georgia Senate election. Right now, as things stand, the Republicans are controlling 50 Senate seats and the Democrats are holding 48 Senate seats. What is making this election very interesting is that there are two senatorial seats that are being contested in the same state for the first time simultaneously. And if the Democrats bagged both seats, this would bring the balance in the Senate at 50-50, with Vice President Kamala Harris as the tiebreaker, being the pro tempore chair of the Senate. Now, what does this mean? Assuming that the Democrats do get control of the Senate, This also means that they've already gotten control in the White House as well as the House of Representatives. It only means one thing, that any reform agenda that incoming President Joe Biden will be carried forward can be enacted quite easily. We've seen in 2008 how Barack Obama swept the entire legislative assembly with his sweeping reforms, but in 2010, the Democrats lost control of the Senate, and since then, until the end of his tenureship as the president in 2016, for 6 years after that, it's very hard for him to pull through with any reform of legislative assembly. So my question to you is, Hafiz, what is the reality of things in the US? How do you think this January 5th senatorial election in Georgia is going to pan out?
I mean, this is pretty much a toss-up. If we look at the latest numbers, it shows they are neck and neck. The percentage points is probably less than between less than 2 to less than 1.
Yeah.
So basically, it's a very close race. But it's a pivotal race for President-elect Joe Biden.
Yeah.
And as you can see, he went on almost daily road shows to Georgia, which he is the first Democratic candidate to actually win Georgia
to flip it since
1992.
Exactly.
And this is important because his message throughout, before the election, post-election, has always been about righting the wrongs or keeping the temperature low. So it's about making changes to whatever 45th President Donald Trump did. So for that to happen, as you said earlier, he needs to have an easier path in terms of reforming.
Yeah,
and
so
if he lost this, the Senate is going to block every single
legislative assembly. That's of course. That's a whole question. What we talked about just now before the break was about how politicians need to be consistent with their message.
Yes.
And the message that Donald Trump has been bringing forth is, be careful, there's a bad guy out there, I'm the guy that can save the day. And Joe Biden and the Democrats are carrying that whole message of the Republicans are not taking care of you.
Yes.
They have failed miserably in controlling the pandemic. And of course, the number of deaths in the US, Americans have never died from one cause more than COVID-19, and because of that, the Democrats are running this message of, if you vote us in, we can take care better than the Republicans can. And this is the story of our own election as well, where we need to have consistent messaging from our politicians in order for them to resonate well. Yes. The issue here is, it's always an all or nothing story when you come with messages, meaning that if you carry this message, if it resonates, you get voted in. If it doesn't resonate with the voters, you don't get the votes. And this is the thing that our politicians are afraid the most about, doubling down their bets and saying that I am this person, vote me in based on this. And if they do get voted in based on that particular message, then so be it. Trump ran on a very consistent message in 2016. He was divisive. Voted in. Very divisive, but it's consistent. That's what I'm talking about, right? You can't sway the messaging as the seasons change, right? You can't do that. You have to have a consistent message. My bet right now is that they might not win both seats. They might win one seat. Ossoff seems to be a better chance of winning this than Warnock will be. But the messaging has to be very, very clear and consistent. If the Georgians, for some reason, reject these kind of consistent messages that the Democrats bring, then so be it.
Clearly, reform is not in their minds.
Yeah. And if that's the will of the people, or at least in the will of the Georgians, and therefore it can be reflected as the will of the Americans, then so be it. But at least they are consistent on their messaging. And that's what I'm looking for here in our politicians as well. We need to have a consistent messaging amongst our politicians.
Yes, but again, going back to Joe Biden, this is a make or break for him, because otherwise he would not be able to have a free hand or free rein at doing things. And you're absolutely right about this consistent messaging. And I think politicians are always they always worry about the next election and not the next generation. And this kind of mindset has to change in general to ensure that Malaysia as a society move and progress to greater heights.
Fantastic. Okay, tell us what you think about some of the items that are happening on the week ahead. Also, as we started off this show, this is a new show that we want to bring forward to you and present to you some of the ideas that can be thought about for the entire week. Hafiz?
Yes, exactly. And do send us your feedback, as we want to know what do you think that is important for us to cover on the
So
week ahead.
use hashtag AWANI News, and of course, if you want, you can tag Hafiz or myself, or both for that matter, and share your ideas as well on what we should include on the upcoming episode of the week ahead. Remember, this show is a brand new one that we will be bringing to you every week, so I hope that we can improve on this show as we go along. For now, Happy New Year, and I hope that 2021 will be better for you than it was in 2020. My name is Ibrahim Sani.
And I'm Hafiz Mazuki.
See you next week.